Welcome back to another episode of Outreach with Reggie, the space where we dig into truth, justice, and what it really takes to build change within our communities. Today, I feel like it's going to be a very good episode. I don't know why. Just feels like that. Today's episode is called Was DEI Ever Enough? Or, to some, we'll say DEI was never enough. Because for years, corporations, universities, and institutions promised diversity, equity, and inclusion. But lately, we have seen a wave after wave after wave of retreats, layoffs, and entire offices shutting down. And just this week, right here in Atlanta, Emory University announced it's eliminating its entire DEI infrastructure. So today we are asking the hard question. Was DEI ever more than a PR move? And if not, what does real equity actually look like? Stay tuned. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's the topic of today. And as I go into today's episode, I often think about when we saw the commercials and all of these companies that partnered with businesses that represented DEI. Affirmative action was a thing, and people were really going out of their way to show that, hey, I am your ally. I'm in unison with what you guys are going through. Because if we're being honest, 2020 was a wild time. 2020 wasn't just about COVID. It's had a lot of stuff going on too that really hit home for a lot of people. And not in a good way. We saw multiple acts of violence against regarding civil rights. We saw George Floyd. We saw Breonna Taylor. I want to get his name correct. But we saw a young man get killed just for jogging. That hurts. It's scary. It was a scary time. How do you turn a blind eye to it? So as this was going on, companies came together, banded together to open more initiatives towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. But what did that really mean? What did that really mean? Well, as we go into the data, it was reported that after George Floyd's murder in 2020, the U.S. companies pledged over 50, I want to say billion, towards racial equity. But reports show that less than 10% of that money has ever been spent. Now, I'm not above being fact checked, so if you feel like that goes against the grain or anything like that, please. I'm not above objection, and I'm willing to open the floor to further conversation. But these are just the reports I got. Also, DEI jobs surged in 2020 and 2021, but by 2023, they fell down to 38% year over year, especially after the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action. Much to the point now, in 2025, universities are under federal pressure, and just this week, as I reported before, the Emory University shut down all of its DEI offices, citing compliance with those new mandates. As it was reported by Atlanta News First, student leaders at Emory called this a dismantling of campus life, with NAACP says that all options are on the table. Because this isn't just about Emory. It's a part of a national rollback. Another institution that we often think about, of course, earlier this year was Target. Target was one of the first to pull back, removing many Black small business owners of products from their stores nationwide. And how did we do that? We pulled our dollar away. We pulled our dollar away and said, no, we want real allies, true allies, allies that stand by us. So it got up to a point where it was $12 billion that they were losing. And that was our dollar. That was the dollars of many people who lost their jobs, lost their livelihood, lost millions of dollars in business because of the removal of DEI programs and projects and things of that nature. And I don't necessarily think about the loss, but rather than the question I ask, what is real equity? What is real opportunity to craft something for DEI? What does real diversity mean? And what does it look like on an institutional level within these universities, businesses, colleges, or even communities itself? What does it look like? So, without further ado, that's why I'm introducing my special guest for today's episode. She works closely within this work as a DEI specialist. She's going to give us an amazing interview. I love this interview so much. So, as you stay tuned, hopefully you're listening. Continue to listen to the podcast. And this is my guest, Janis, I apologize, Janis Middleton. So stay tuned.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Reggie Holloway, and this is Outreach with Reggie. I have a special guest. Her name is Janis Middleton, and she has a wealth of experience that she's going to share with us about DEI. So without further ado, welcome, Janis.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Reggie. I'm happy to be here. Hello, everyone.
Absolutely, absolutely. So to get things started here, can you still see me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, perfect. Give me 1 second. I am going to Yes. So as we get started, can you talk about your experience with DEI?
Yes. So I work in advertising. I work at an ad agency here, a couple of ad agencies here in Atlanta, Georgia. One being 22 Squared, which has been around for 100 plus years, and that's our full service agency. And then Trade School, which is a production kind of content engine agency, which has been around for about 5 years at this point. I think they opened their doors in February or March of 2020, which was right before the pandemic, which was the perfect time, right?
Yes.
My background in advertising is in strategy, whether that's communication strategy, media strategy, or I would even say social media strategy as well. That was my background. But about 5, 6, I would say 7 or 8 years ago, I started to build out our inclusion strategy at the agency, which now I hold the title of Chief Inclusion Officer at these two agencies. And so I lead all of our inclusion strategy from an internal perspective with the people. I don't sit in HR. I do work with HR, but we're a bit of a separate function coming from a strategic lens. And then I also help with inclusion strategy for our clients as well. So from a brand perspective, making sure that they're reaching multicultural audiences, growth audiences, making sure they're paying attention to cultural nuances and things like that. So I have a bit of an inside-out approach as we think about inclusion within advertising.
Oh, that's amazing. So, in your experience, when DEI was at its so-and-so peak, as they say in 2020 or after 2020 or bit within COVID, we saw a lot of those commercials that I'm pretty grateful for, uh, majority of them. Uh, what, what feel like what did it feel like inside those companies or institutions? Did it feel like real change, or did it feel like damage control as we saw a lot of those commercials?
Yeah, I can speak to our experience, and then I'll kind of speak general. I will say we say that was the height. But at the end of the day, I'm 45 years old, so that wasn't my first rodeo, right?
Right.
That wasn't the hype for me. I've seen this playbook many of times. I've read this book many of times. So if anything, it was different. I always call it America's alarm clock, but it wasn't our first alarm clock. We just kept hitting snooze, to be quite honest with you. And there was something, as we know, with the coupling of the pandemic. You were at home, there's nothing to do, and you had to pay attention to the news. You had to pay attention to this black man getting killed, which is a little different than when Trayvon Martin was killed, right? Or when Amadullah was killed in New Jersey. So there are many times that this has happened, but I think couple that with where the state of the world, we were just in a different place where everyone had to pay attention. And I will say, I don't want to say all of it was just fluff. I think the time of it was, I think there was a lot of well-meaning. I think there was a lot of blurbs and Instagram and post your square. And I'll be honest, none of that stuff matters to me. I believe I want the people to be taken care of. I have the way that I lead inclusion and the way that I've led it at our institutions was words are for a piece of paper, a book, or something like that. We need action. It's not enough to call yourself an ally. It is enough to actually be an ally in action. It's not enough to just put words on your website. What does your leadership team look like? What does your team look like in general? You know what I'm saying? What does your organization believe in? What are your morals? So I think at that moment it did feel a little different in 2020. If I'm being honest, I felt like even if organizations or the world, I'm not just going to put it on organizations, it's really humans. If these humans are waking up, that's great. But I felt like the difference for me was the people on the margins, and I'm going to specifically speak to Black people. I think we were at a point where we were saying, you know what? We're done here. We're going to speak up. We're going to have different conversations. We're going to talk about this. And I will say that was the difference for me. That was probably the first time that I saw that. Obviously, I wasn't here in 1964 when the civil rights movement was happening. So I understand that. I'm sure that was happening then as well, hence why we have some of the civil rights we have today. But for me, I felt like we decided collectively, whether silently or out loud, that we were going to do something. We understand America. America doesn't change its stripes. We've seen this story before. The pendulum swings this way, it'll swing that way. And so I think this time was different because we were speaking up and we were demanding action.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I just remember that time. It felt like, even now, you see it with the Target, how much of our dollar really accounts.
Amen. Yes.
So it's I think, like you said, collectively, it comes down to the people, not because like it's good for awareness, but it's really the boots on. I like to call it the boots on the ground.
Yeah, agreed. And looking at Target, just to go off on a tiny tangent here, this is, like I said, we weren't here when the civil rights movement, when they were having sit-ins at Woolworth, right? We weren't here for the bus boycott. This is our version. And I'm proud to see it. I got to admit, and that's why I'm saying I think we collectively decided in 2020, no more. You can walk away from it. We won't let you. You can walk away from it, then we'll walk away from you, right? I think we put on a different hat and a different lens of how we approached it, and I'm very proud to see that.
Absolutely. Because I want to veer back towards 2020 in particular. Doing a bit of research here, it says that U.S. companies pledged over $50 billion towards racial equity, but research shows less than 10% of that was actually or has actually been spent. Um, but one would have to ask, why was that never, I guess, highlighted in a way? What would you say if you had to say, like, why was it never, ever addressed?
I think it's one of those things where people, I'm going to speak from the practitioner's point of view, the people who do this work. Um, I think we, people who do this work have to have a great deal of grace and a great deal of reality and a great deal of compartmentalization.
Yes.
This work, when we read stats like that, we hear stats like that, there's a little bit, and we have to have a great deal of optimism. We have to couple that with reality. We hear, and I say that because the optimism is the $50 million pledge, right? We have to believe that they're going to make good on this. I think as a people, that is literally in our DNA. We have to believe. If we don't believe, our people will perish, right? The world has done enough to where it would be enough for us to just say, you know what, forget it and give up. So I think there is an optimism that is just natural within our DNA, where we have to have hope. We have to have hope. And then we always get punched in the face with the reality, right? And that is the 10% that actually was donated. But I got to tell you, it's not surprising. That's probably not highlighted because many of us are going to say, well, per usual, and then we have to still continue the work. While we understand that there is space for hope, we always have to hold that space for it may not happen. And I think for those of us who do this work, and I think those of us who sit on the margins here in the world, or in America specifically, we have to know that that probably wasn't, they were never going to make good on that in the first place. So I think that we have a level of hope and optimism to a certain extent, just enough to not be disappointed, but to understand we knew this was going to happen. Because if we stay in the, oh my God, I can't believe it happened, the devastation of that, we can't move forward with what we can do, right? So I think there are a lot of things at play there, but it was highlighted for us practitioners. We knew this, we've known that stat. Those of us who do this work know that stat. I know the world doesn't want to highlight that, but it was running around in our circles quite a bit. But like I said, it was like we knew this. We knew this would happen. As I stated earlier, America never changes its stripes. So I think I think it's one of those things where then what can we do, right? What can we do? And I think you have to continue to re-strategize. I don't think it's a moment to give up, which is why you always have to have that cup half full of realness and optimism, because you can't give up, right? It's not a time to read a stat like that and say, all right, well, it didn't happen. They lied to us. That's fine, but what can we get done, and how do we move forward? And I will tell you, my philosophy, Reggie, is I believe in the slow roll anyway. I knew these people weren't going to donate $50 million. I knew that. I think we have to go from, in order to get to 100, I think we have to remember that we have to get to 1, 2, 3. There's a whole bunch we have to get to before we get to that 100. And there's a whole bunch. If you think about a mountain, there are a lot of steps we have to take to get to that mountain. And I think for me, the 50 million I knew was never going to happen, but I do believe in the slow roll. Why, well, what can we do with 5 million? What can we do with 3 million? What can we do with the 10? How do we make this grow? That is how you make things sustainable. A tree, an oak tree doesn't go from an acorn to an oak tree in 3 days. It takes years, eons for that to happen. And I think with this work, in order to make change, you have to think about that acorn growing into an oak, and you have to think about incremental change in order to get to that big change.
Absolutely. I'm going to pivot here to something that's happened fairly recently, actually. Yes, as there's a new story out now that I saw today that Emory University has completely got rid of their DEI programs amidst political pressure, as they've quoted. And I wanted to get your what was your first or your initial reaction to it? What are your thoughts?
There are two ways that I have to think about things, and I'll tell you, and I'm thinking about it as Janis, the practitioner, but also Janis as the Black woman who navigates this world in America. That's how I have to approach everything. And one of the things that we all have to remember is more than one thing has to be true at once, or else you just simply won't make it in life. I think the first thing that I thought about was how I know people who helped build that program. And it's not just blood, sweat, and tears. It's love, it's community, it's blood, it's sweat, it's tears, it's intention. There's so many things that go into that. And to watch it being dismantled brick by brick is very disheartening. But it doesn't take away what they have built. The people who worked in that office, the work that they've done, it does not, if they're listening to this, it doesn't take away the fact that you are a builder. It does not take away the fact that you have built something that made the world better, not just an institution. It's bigger than that. You made people better, okay? You made an institution better, but you made people better. So I hope that they know that. And then the second train of thought that I also go after is, Reggie, I'm going to be very frank. I honestly don't give a shit what you call DEI. Just get the work done, okay? Make the place equitable. A rose is still a rose by any other name. I honestly do not care what you call it. Are the people still feeling, because even when you call it DEI, going back to your point, 50 million somehow only ended up being 5 million, and they called it DEI. So even when you call it DEI, what does that actually mean? We need the action, So if the action is going to stay in place, and this is where I question them, right? This is where I hold any institution or anybody or organization to the fire of, are the people still going to feel welcomed? Are they still going to feel like they belong? Are they still going to feel like they're on an island there? Are they still going to feel safe? Are they still going to feel community? Like, those are the things that matter. You can scrub your website of certain words, and I don't care. We need the work to be done, and that is my question, and that is my biggest thing right now. They are a for-profit business, okay? They get government funds. As an adult, I have to understand that to a certain extent. As someone who works at a business, as someone who's an entrepreneur in some ways, I have to understand that. But I don't have to understand it to a point where if the people don't feel safe and they don't feel like they belong in your organization or at your institution, I do hold you accountable for that. When we think about equity, what does that mean for education? What does that mean for the people learning at your institution? What does that mean for the people who are teaching at your institution? Because you got to understand, education is important, and I know that we don't always see it that way, but it is. And the teachers, and who is, stats have shown when students on the margins see teachers who look like them, they are X amount of, more times to graduate high school or college or something like that. Yeah. That's what I care about. So as long as those things are being taken away, and that's what's in danger, my friend. I don't care. You can take down your website. I just need to know those things are still in place, and that's what I care about the most. So those are my two trains of thought on the Emory decision of, are we still taking care of the people and letting the people who built that know this is no mark on who you are and what you've done. You should be proud of what you've done. If you hadn't done it so well, they wouldn't have been trying to take it away. That's what you keep in mind.
And I often think about that too, because also in the news, I believe it was Howard University, they just won their case against the head chief in charge. So
exactly.
So just seeing it on that level, and seeing the contrast, seeing it here at home, and realizing, like, man, it's still possible because of the groundwork that's being done by the people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And something I said to a friend who used to work in that office, there specifically, I said to her, inclusion is who you are. Those of us as practitioners, many of us, it's not a job. It's my title, sure, but it's literally who I am. I'm going to make any space equitable no matter where I am, right? So even if, that something were to happen at my own organization, they were to say, oh, we're not going, if I am still there, inclusion matters, because it is who I am. It is what I believe in. So whatever space I'm in. And so that's what I think about those who practice this work. It's not just a title for many of us. I know it's a lot of people that may be the case, but for many of us, I want to make that clear. It's not just a title for us. It is literally who we are.
Absolutely. So as we shift again, I want to open the space for it to be, it seems like the sum, or it seems like as they remove the groundwork that you guys do, or within DEI, or just equitable work, what would be if it's not enough, if DEI is not enough, or the work's not enough, where do you feel like is a reasonable start if we're starting from scratch again?
If we're starting from scratch again, I'm always going to start with the people. The way that I think about strategy and the way that I think about anything getting done is it always starts with the people. When you look around you at your organization, or even in your own community, or even in your friend group, if you're at a dinner table, if you're at a wedding, I don't care. Who's at that table? What perspectives are you getting? Here's the thing, Reggie, as human beings, we have to know that we're only as good and as learned as our own perspectives, right? Therefore, we should, as human beings, want to know more about other things outside of ourselves, right? And I mean that in many, many different ways. It doesn't always have to be, I know we always boil it down to just gender and race. It's bigger than that. You know what I'm saying? It's language, it's way of culture, way of living, it's background, it's so many things, right? It's, you know, we are, as one person, we are a puzzle or pieces of many things to make the puzzle of who we are. There are many identities that I even hold, right, as just a woman. So I'm not just a woman. I'm not just a Black woman, right? I'm many things beyond that. So I think we always have to start with the people. And what are we learning from people who are outside of ourselves? Are our groups homogenous? I think as we get older, it becomes harder to make intentional friendships, right? College campus, you're probably going to have a diverse group of friends because you may be on a campus that's pretty diverse or something like that. So that may be the case. But as we get older, you have to become more intentional. And so I think we have to be intentional about who we're learning from, who we're growing with. Yes. So for me, it really starts with the people. I have to say that. And so I would say that even from an organization standpoint, think about who is a part of your organization and who lives up to certain values. One, there are core values that you live up to as an organization and your beliefs and all of that. You know, everybody has them posted in their break rooms. But what is that? How does that break down to the people that you've actually hired? And then from there, I think then you get into what's the culture? What are the pillars that we're going to ladder up to? What are the 3, 5, or 7 things that we are going to ladder up to that everybody has to hold in order to work here? That's one thing. And everybody doesn't have to look alike. Everyone doesn't have to be alike. But we all have to he-ho the same, mantra at some point. And we've got to he-ho it in our own way. I think authenticity, allowing realness, allowing people to be who they are is very key. And I'm going to tell you, I'm always going to say pay equity. We have a long way to go, and we have a lot to catch up on. Yeah. I'll tell you, I used to make the joke back in 2020. They will do anything but reparations. You're going to take off Aunt Jemima. You're going to change Uncle Ben. We didn't ask for that. We wanted you to pay their families, okay? We wanted you to pay their families for their pictures being on your box for years and years and years. That's what we asked for. We asked for reparations. We asked that you pay Henrietta Lack's family. That's what we asked for. Change the game of silence. That's what we asked for. So anything but reparations is kind of what I'm always going to say. We don't call it master bedroom. We call it private. Don't care. Where's the pay equity? Be fair and recognize the gaps. Living in Atlanta, growing up in Atlanta, this is home for me. The gaps of wealth. I mean, my goodness. And nobody's saying everybody has to be rich. I'm not saying that. But I am saying, what does equity look like? It's not about equal. What does equity look like? What do you need to do for those who didn't have that head start to get them to the finish line at the same time? What do you need to do? You know what I'm saying? So I would say those are all the things that I think we need to start with, but we have to start with the people. I think that we don't, and I got to tell you the key, Reggie, it's not always agreeing, and it's not always agreeing. We don't live in a world of agreement. I don't think we grow when we agree with everything. We become yes men and yes women. We do need to understand each other, okay?
Yes.
And that is not belittling someone's point of view, someone's background, or where they come from. That is their reality, and understanding that and accepting that for them. It may not be accepted for you, but accepting that for them. So I'm always going to go for people, culture, pay equity, and what does that look like for you, your family, your organization? I think that comes out in many ways. That was a long answer, but there you go.
No, it's a beautiful thing. I often say enough times, because the question within the work that I'm able to see firsthand and able to be a part of, someone who's not in it often asks, like, hey, I want to, but I feel like I don't have the resources, the money, the platform, or anything like that. But I'm pretty sure you can speak to this as well. It's taking the role I like to call of a gardener.
Yes.
Like, you don't have fruit, vegetables all there at one time. It starts with a seed. And it's like you get to the nucleus of what issues you want to present, because there's a wealth of issues, especially with from the institutional level. But I often say, if we can just start with the seeds and growing it from there.
Absolutely. I absolutely love that philosophy. And I would add on to that and say there are many different roles of activism. I think we tend to only think of activism as the march. We tend to think of activism as how, our grandparents, our forefathers, our foremothers, and how they had to activate. We have many roles of activism. My role of activism, or my role of resistance, is in the corporate space. I like to diversify those tables. I like to shake those tables. And to take that a click down, I like to do it in the advertising space, because to give you a stat, in 1979, advertising was 5% Black. You fast forward to 2021, advertising was 6% Black. So in 40-something odd years, it moved a marginal percentage. And even then, it could have been rounded up. It could have been 5.5%, and somebody just rounded it up to 6. So that is my plight. And I say that because it is our culture that is advertised.
Yes.
So I do believe that we should be at those tables. We should be the ones making those decisions and giving our input and giving our thoughts and things like that. So we have to realize what our role of activism is. Sometimes it's going to be police brutality. Some of it's going to be in the corporate space. Some of it's going to be in the nonprofit space. When I think about Ann, my friend Ann, what she's doing. And so I think we have to really think about what is that seed. And I'm so glad you said that, because again, an acorn doesn't go into an oak tree overnight. So I love that you said that. What is that seed? And it's okay to start small. I think a lot of times because the challenges are so big, I know we're trying to bite off a lot, right? And we just need to bite off what we can chew and understand that small progress is progress. And once you add all of that up, it becomes a big change,
Absolutely. So, lastly, for someone who may be listening, may be watching this interview, and they're saying, man, what does that first step look like? What does the seed in the ground look like from what I aim to do, if it's joining what we're doing here now regarding the work that you guys do there, or just starting small with the things that they are passionate about, that they want to advocate for? What will be the encouragement that you would give?
I break it down into 3 things, and I'm a strategist, so I'm always breaking things down into 3s. But before I get into the 3 things, I want you to figure out, what is it that matters to you, and what is your purpose? Now, when I say purpose, I think we've gone on to this really Oprah way of thinking about it, or Mel Robinson way of thinking about it, and thinking we're going to have this big aha moment, or that the purpose has to be so big that you have to serve the world. That's not everybody's purpose. And it also doesn't always have to come to you in an aha moment. I think my purpose came to me, and I would argue, probably the most trying times in my life. That is when my purpose came to me. It was not an aha moment. It was a painful moment, So but social media and the world will think that you got out of bed and you got your coffee and the God shine the sun on you, and then it was written on the wall, and it's like, come on, son, it doesn't always, it just doesn't. So I want to say, when you think about that purpose, decide that based on you and your values. One of the things that I think we tend to do today, and it's because we have access to so much information and also access to people that we don't even know through social media, that we tend to decide our individual purpose collectively. I can't decide my purpose based on my sorority. I can't decide my purpose based on what my cheerleading group is doing. I have to decide my purpose for me, and then I can then infiltrate and, like, what does that mean for the sorority I'm a part of? What does that mean for the networking group I'm a part of, right? Find that out individually. And once you do that, when you think about what are the action steps, I do break those down. Once you have your purpose, whatever that may be, then it's time to ladder up a strategy to that, right? I break that down into 3 things. It's feel, speak, and act. Feel, speak, and act. Feel. I think we tend to go to act immediately, right? Which is how things tend to crumble. Things are not sustainable. Things don't have necessarily a solid foundation because we're like, I'm mad, act, right? Or I'm upset, or I need change, act. I want you to feel first. Feel your feelings. I don't think we take the time to ask ourselves, why am I feeling this way? Why did that rub me a certain way? What is it that I'm actually feeling? Am I mad? Am I angry? Am I being passive aggressive? Whatever the case may be, work through those feelings. One, because you're entitled to feel your feelings. And you need to sit with that, right? The second thing is speak. When you felt your feelings and what's actually making you tick or making you go or making you feel a certain way, what is it that needs to be said in order for you to express that? Right? When you think about what needs to be said, how does someone need to hear it in order for them to receive it, in order for them to feel it, and in order for them to like really create support you and create an action plan for it. So what is it that people need to, and once I give these 3 things, I'll give you an example to really blow it out for you. But like, what is it that needs to be said? What is it that they need to hear to where they can hear me? And then act. What is the action I need to take? And what is the action I would like someone else to take to help support my actions? So to break that down into like an example, when 2020 happened, to kind of bring this entire conversation full circle, when 2020 happened, I was a leader at my organization, very well liked and loved at my organization. And then also recognizing that I'm one of the very few who works in this community, who works in advertising in this industry, and I'm blessed, right?
Right.
But all that being coupled with, my people are being hunted. This man was just killed in the middle of the street, and it took me back to, I think my first time that I really felt hopeless was when Trayvon Martin was killed. My life changed. When Zimmerman walked, my life changed. I could not believe the verdict. I think I was silent for 2. I could not believe the verdict. So I think what I had to realize was, what am I feeling? Because I was feeling as an employee, as a Black leader that has to stand up for other Black employees, and I'm saying Black for now because this was about Black Lives Matter back in 2020, so that's what I'm saying. But it's I'm like, dang, but I got to stand up for my people. I got to stand up for my folks. What am I doing? And so that was really hard. So I needed to sit and think about, what is it that I'm feeling as an individual? What am I feeling as an employee? What am I feeling as a woman, as a Black woman? What am I feeling for my father, for my brother? And then what is it that I need to say? And that was key because I knew I was going into a room where I was going to be an only. Okay. That room was full of people who didn't look like me, who didn't have my experiences, and it's not to their own, it's not always their fault. It just is. Okay. They didn't grow up like me. They've never been a Black woman. They've never been, what HBCU or whatever the case may be. So what is it that they needed to hear, and how do I need to say it so that we can move into action? And then that action was recognizing that I could share a whole bunch of problems and a whole bunch of things with them. But because they've never been in my shoes, why don't I help them with those solutions? Why don't I say, this is what this looks like, and here's how I need you to help. Here's how I need you to show up. That's where the action comes in, right? Telling them, here's what I'm going to do, and here's how I'd like to get your help. And that's kind of the breakdown of Feel, Speak, Act. And it has really taught me a lot over the years when I do that, both in, life and at work. It has helped me tremendously. So those are the 3 points I would give to people.
Well, that's beautiful. Well, Ms. Middleton, I thank you so much for your time. You've given me a wealth of things to take with me, and I'm pretty sure that everybody who's listening, who's watching, is going to appreciate this as well. If there's anything you would like to highlight that you got going on, that you're working on currently, the floor is completely yours.
Oh, I appreciate that. And usually I don't have an answer for that, but now I do. I actually started a networking community called First Not Only for women of color in the advertising, marketing, communication space. It's here in Atlanta. And it is now open to many women of color in different industries because it's grown so much within the last year. But if anyone wants to find me on LinkedIn, and if you're in Atlanta, you're a woman of color in a professional setting, please reach out. There is a men's chapter coming at some point, trust me, because I know there's a need and we've got to fill that gap. But I am so proud of this community and the way that they've uplifted each other. And the only prerequisite for being a part of the community is to lift while you climb, which is why it's called First Not Only. I can be the first in many spaces, but it is my goal to not just be the only. So making sure I bring others along with me. So that is the networking community that I'm very most proud of. The ladies are amazing in there. So they can hit me up on LinkedIn if they want to learn more.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for your time.
Thank you, dear. Talk soon. Have a good one.
You as well.
Bye-bye.
It isn't just a program. It's a practice. It is a daily choice to redistribute power, to center those who have been silenced, and fight for structures that last beyond a press release. So the question for all of us is this: if DEI was never enough, what role would you be playing in building something stronger? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're listening on Spotify, answer today's poll. Do you trust DEI programs to make real change? And if today's episode spoke to you, share it with someone who's wrestling with the same questions. This has been Outreach with Reggie. I'm Reggie Holloway as always. I want to thank my guest, Janis Middleton. She was super sweet, super kind, and amazing. I love our interview together. So support everything, all of her organizations, and be sure to also look after each other. And even if you feel like this work is too heavy, or you may be confused on how or what it looks like to even get your foot in the door, remember to take the role of a gardener. The fruits and vegetables just don't come in the beginning. It starts with a seed. Water that seed of wanting to do change, to make change. Plant it. Make it grow. Thank you for listening. Stay encouraged, stay engaged, and always stay reaching out. Take care.